I've got a confession. I used to think horror was the junk food of cinema. You know, a cheap thrill. A monster in the dark, a jump scare, maybe a clever twist or two. Fun? Sure, but nothing more. To me, it was the popcorn genre, designed to make you flinch but never really think or feel. Making someone jump seemed easy. Throw in some creepy music, crank up the tension, splash a little blood, and boom, you've got a scare. But making someone feel? Making them confront something deeper? That felt like the job of drama or science fiction. But I was wrong. Horror isn't just about scares. When it's done right, it can be something raw and deeply human. It doesn't just make us jump, it unsettles us and forces us to confront the fears and truths we'd rather avoid. And in this video, I'll share how it completely changed the way I see the genre. I'm Albert, this is Lo-Fi Cinema, and today we're taking a ride into the heart of horror. Back then, I thought horror could be clever every so often. Take George Romero's Dawn of the Dead, where zombies shuffle through a shopping mall as a metaphor for consumerism. It was clever, sure, but even with that, I saw it as a surface-level trick. To me, horror could play with ideas, but if you wanted to dive deep into humanity, morality, or the human condition, you turned to sci-fi. Science fiction was the thinker genre. It asked big questions and tackled existential dilemmas. Horror, on the other hand, felt like the rowdy younger sibling, fun at parties, but not the one you turn to for a deep, meaningful conversation. That mindset stuck with me for years. I'd seen the classics, The Shining, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Rosemary's Baby. At the time, I dismissed characters like Freddy Krueger as little more than creepy icons, entertaining, but empty. I saw those films as straightforward survival stories with a supernatural twist. The truth is, I wasn't really paying attention. I wasn't looking for the deeper meanings behind the scares. And because I wasn't looking, I missed what these movies were truly about. Then, Get Out planted a seed of doubt. It was sharp, bold, and so precise in its commentary that I admired it right away. If you haven't seen it, or it's been a while, let me catch you up. Chris, a young black photographer, heads out for a weekend trip to meet his white girlfriend, Rose's family. Right from the start, something feels off. Rose's parents, Dean and Missy, are way too friendly. It feels fake and awkward.
By the way, I would have voted for Obama for a third term if I could. Best president in my lifetime, hands down.
Then there are the housekeepers, Georgina and Walter, who act super detached, as if there's something not quite right going on beneath the surface. As the weekend unfolds, Chris realizes this isn't just a case of an awkward family dynamic. He discovers they're part of a horrifying scheme where wealthy white people auction off black bodies, transferring their own consciousness into them while leaving the original minds trapped in a powerless, nightmarish state. Though the premise is profoundly striking, what stayed with me wasn't just the concept, it was the way the movie made me feel. Not with jump scares, but with a deep, lingering unease I couldn't shake. There was something primal, something that showed what horror, at its core, can really do. I didn't have the tools to unpack it then. I just knew it had shifted the way I saw horror, taking it somewhere unfamiliar. So I let that feeling sit, waiting for the moment it would all start to make sense. That moment came when I read John Truby's Anatomy of Genres. Truby explains that horror isn't just about scares or life and death stakes, it's about the things we try to hide. Personal fears, historical traumas, cultural guilt, the unresolved truths we'd rather avoid. He calls them ghosts. Not the kind that haunt old houses, but the lingering debts from our past that refuse to disappear. Horror takes those hidden fears and turns them into monsters we can't ignore. It creates a safe space to explore deep-seated fears. You're not just rooting for the protagonist to survive. You're watching them confront loss, guilt, or unresolved debts from the past. That's why horror feels like a reckoning. It doesn't let you escape. It drags those ghosts into the light and makes you confront them. When I read that, everything I thought I knew about horror fell apart. A genre I once wrote off as shallow turns out to be surprisingly introspective. A space where facing old ghosts can lead to a bit more self-understanding. Watching those classic horror films again after reading Truby felt like putting on a new pair of glasses. Suddenly, they weren't just creepy stories anymore. They were packed with hidden layers, haunted not just by literal ghosts and monsters, but by old wounds, past mistakes, and fears we've never fully outgrown. Take A Nightmare on Elm Street. On the surface, it's all about Freddy Krueger haunting teenagers in their dreams. But if you look closer, Freddy isn't just a random demon with a razor glove. He's actually the result of parents taking justice into their own hands. They killed Freddy, a child murderer, by setting him on fire. They thought they'd finally put an end to evil and stop the nightmare. Instead, they ended up passing their guilt and fear down to their kids. So Freddy becomes more than just a scary figure. He's the lingering ghost of unresolved issues that keep coming back to haunt the next generation. The real horror isn't just Freddy's face, it's realizing that old sins don't fade, they linger and cast long shadows. So if A Nightmare on Elm Street shows us how family guilt can haunt the next generation, what happens when an entire nation carries a lingering ghost? Nowadays, most people see Godzilla as pure entertainment, a giant, roaring monster featured in countless films and merch. It's easy to think of Godzilla as just a fun, larger-than-life creature destroying cities for our enjoyment. But the original Godzilla isn't just a movie creature, it's the country's ghost, a living embodiment of trauma and atomic nightmares. It was a way for Japan to confront a national wound that wouldn't simply vanish. The roaring beast and its path of destruction become a way to face what ordinary life tries to repress. What's fascinating is how Godzilla has evolved over time. Each new movie still carries pieces of that original fear, showing how cultural ghost can persist and adapt across generations. While modern audiences might watch Godzilla for the spectacle and excitement, the underlying legacy, a generational ghost on a national scale, remains embedded in the story's DNA. Once you start seeing horror this way, you notice it everywhere, often reflecting fears tied to our collective past. But some movies go even deeper, connecting personal demons with the weight of historical legacies, like in The Shining. Jack's downfall isn't just about a haunted hotel, it's about his own demons.
Danny had scattered some of his school papers all over the room, and my husband grabbed his arm, to pull him away from him. On this particular occasion, my husband just used too much strength and he injured Danny's arm.
His history of drinking and hurting his family bubbles to the surface as the Overlook cranks up the pressure. The hotel doesn't create the monster in Jack. It reveals what's already there, pushing him until he can't hide it anymore.
That bitch. As long as I live, she'll never let me forget what happened.
And then there's the Overlook Hotel itself. If you pay attention, there's an interesting detail early on.
The site is supposed to be located on an Indian burial ground, and I believe they actually had to repel a few Indian attacks as they were building it.
The hotel was built on land taken from Native Americans. At first, it feels like a throwaway line, but maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's a nod to America's own buried past. The hotel, built on stolen ground, becomes a symbol of history refusing to stay buried. It doesn't just haunt Jack with his personal ghosts, it amplifies them, connecting his personal demons to the nation's unresolved legacy. And with that, I revisited Get Out through this new lens. Like The Shining, Get Out explores both personal and national ghosts. With this new understanding, Chris's journey took on a whole new meaning. His story is shaped by personal trauma and mirrors the larger societal issues that still linger today. As a kid, Chris was paralyzed by fear, unable to act, when his mother died in a hit-and-run accident. That moment left a lasting scar. The guilt taught him to keep his head down, avoid confrontation, and stay silent, even when he should speak up. It was a survival mechanism. But this learned passivity becomes the exact vulnerability the Armitages exploit. Beneath their polished, progressive image, the Armitages see black bodies as tools for their own gain. It's a modern-day plantation hidden behind a friendly facade. Georgina and Walter, their housekeepers, embody Truby's concept of machine horror. Their stiff movements and hollow smiles reflect how their humanity has been erased, and they're acting like empty shells, their minds locked away while their bodies serve a new purpose. The sunken place, initially just a creepy metaphor, now feels like the heart of the story. It symbolizes systemic oppression, being fully conscious yet completely powerless. Chris can see and hear everything, but he's unable to act. It's a haunting reminder of how society can keep people aware yet paralyzed. This is horror's real power. It doesn't let you look away. It forces you to sit with the discomfort, to acknowledge what's been buried for too long. Chris's journey in Get Out is about more than survival. It's about confronting his past and breaking free from inaction. By rejecting the silence that once kept him powerless, Chris refuses to remain in the sunken place. Seeing horror in this new way, as confronting the ghosts we'd rather ignore, made me realize I had my own cinematic ghost to face, my assumption that horror had nothing deeper to say. Recognizing that blind spot taught me to look beyond the surface, not just in film, but in storytelling as a whole. Like I said earlier, for a long time I saw sci-fi as the thinking genre, the one that dives into big ideas and makes you reflect. But horror, it doesn't ask you to think first. It makes you feel. And that's what sets these two genres apart. And this got me thinking, what would happen if we took Get Out, with its plot and themes of exploitation, and placed it in the sci-fi genre instead of horror? How would the focus shift? How would the storytelling change? That thought brought me back to Transfer, a lesser-known German sci-fi film from 2010 I'd seen years ago when it first came out. Its premise has clear parallels with Get Out. The film follows a wealthy white couple, Helmut and Greta, who want to extend their lives and stay young. To do this, they use advanced technology to transfer their minds into the bodies of two African refugees, Apollon and Sarah. Struggling with money and looking for a better life, Apollon and Sarah agree to the deal, but they only get their bodies back for 4 hours each night while Helmut and Greta take over. As the story unfolds, Transfer digs deeper into the messy, emotional side of this arrangement. Apollon and Sarah aren't just renting out their bodies. They're also wrestling with the impact it has on their sense of self. Little moments start to reveal the cracks. Their memories and instincts clash with those of their wealthy hosts, blurring the lines between who they are and who they're being forced to be. It's heartbreaking in a quieter way, less about terror and more about a creeping sense of loss, like pieces of themselves are slipping away. While I won't spoil the rest, the differences in how the two genres handle the same themes are striking. Unlike Get Out, which throws you headfirst into raw fear, Transfer takes a more subdued approach, but it's just as unsettling in how it exposes the subtle ways exploitation erodes identity. The fear it evokes is quieter, more reflective. Horror, on the other hand, doesn't let you observe from behind the glass. It smashes you into the scene, forcing you to live the discomfort. Get Out uses horror as a scalpel. It cuts deep and forces you to feel the suffocation, the terror, and the rage. Transfer uses sci-fi as a mirror, holding it up to society and making you examine the cracks in the reflection. The old couple in Transfer isn't overtly malicious. They're scared of aging, clinging to their privilege, and making choices they see as reasonable, and that's what makes it chilling. Not their cruelty, but their entitlement. Their actions feel disturbingly ordinary within a system that allows such exploitation. Sci-fi makes you shudder because it shows how this could easily happen if society keeps moving in that direction. And that's the core difference. Horror's rawness pulls you right into the moment. When Chris fights back, you don't just see it, you feel it. Every action, every struggle carries the urgency of breaking free and reclaiming control. It's immediate, it's visceral, and it stays with you long after the credits roll. Sci-fi makes you think, while horror makes you feel. Looking back, I see now that horror isn't cheap or shallow. When done right, it's one of the most powerful genres. Where I once dismissed it as junk food, I now see it as soul food, deep and necessary. Because if we want to move forward, we have to confront the past. Horror refuses to let us look away. It pulls us into the darkness and forces us to face what's been buried, our fears, our traumas, our truths, and sometimes shining a flashlight into that darkness is the only way to find the path forward.